First topic of the day is we're going to continue with Saudi Arabia and Yemen, really Saudi Arabia versus the Houthis down here. So, what was interesting from yesterday's skirmish? Watch the last video if you need an update. But an Iranian plane carrying Houthis came to Sana'a airport, and Saudi Arabia did not like that. So, they bombed the airport, and then they had to make a diversion and land somewhere else. That fired the Houthis up. They want to break the blockade on their ability to have flights into their airport. All the people in the Houthi region in the west down here were fired up. They were doing protests and lighting off fireworks. So this part, the western part of Yemen, is ready to go to war with Saudi Arabia in support of Iran. But the first thing was we did get some reports and news that Turkey, this is from Turkey Today, but I've seen other outlets, but Trump reportedly gave Saudi Crown Prince MBS his backing for strikes on the Yemen's Houthis, making biggest Saudi Houthi escalation since 2022. So he did go ahead and ask Trump before they bombed that airport. So that's an important piece of information because that could draw Yemen into the war, especially know that there's communication there with the Americans. So that's important. Also, yesterday, they released a video, the Houthis, and they have pretty slick editing, man. You got Final Cut. You could go to Yemen and get some good work, I guess. But they released basically like a target list. It was a video of satellite images of Saudi infrastructure with coordinates. They're threatening these spots. So that is actually going to be all of these yellow here. So they threatened Saudi Arabia here in the Jazan port, which is close, very close to Houthi territory, and then up along the coast of the Red Sea and the port in Jeddah. There's also if you see here, this is a railway station and an airport. So they have an airport, also a railway station they threatened, as well as the port in Jeddah. Of course, this is the biggest port in Saudi Arabia overall monetarily, but it's not the biggest oil port. You'll see that later on. And then nothing up here. Oh, yep, down here. They also threatened the King Abdullah port, I believe. Yep, Abdullah port. So threatened that all along the Red Sea in their video. And then they also threatened central Saudi Arabia and Riyadh. The King Khalid International Airport was on the list. And then also they made some threats over on the east as well. The King Fahd International Airport, as well as this major oil facility in the Gulf over here. So, and the question is, can Yemen even hit that? And the answer is yes, because the Houthis down here were able to strike the airport in Israel. Sorry for you non-Americans, but that's about 1,100 miles, and they were able to hit it. So they can easily, let me restart this. They can easily hit any of these things. That's just 740 miles. So they do have the ability to strike these things. So we got to see about that. One thing that's important up top that was not on the list is this port. Yanbu right here. So this is actually the biggest oil port, not the most commercial overall, but the biggest oil port. And why that is important is if I pull up this infrastructure map here, you can see, I need to remove power. We can see this pipeline in Saudi Arabia, and that's how they're diverting a ton of the oil that they can't get through the Strait of Hormuz while the tensions. They're just sending it across this huge pipeline into the Red Sea, millions and millions of barrels. Well, where does that end? Right here. So even though the Houthis did not threaten this one specifically on their target list, this is what you need to watch out for, because this is how they can shut down Saudi Arabia's oil that is currently avoiding the Strait of Hormuz. Also, another important factor here, there was a strike, the Houthis said, in the northwest part of Yemen last night. So some action there, as well as a drone. Yemen shoots down a Saudi Arabian drone as well in the southwest here. So some action going on, being hit by Saudi Arabia, and then also hitting some things of Saudi Arabia. Another important thing they just announced was that they're going to shut down the Saudi airspace. The Houthis are going to do it. So what does that mean? World Source News put out breaking, and this is not from them, of course, from the Houthis. The Houthis have warned airlines against operating in Saudi Arabian airspace. We warn all airlines. We warn all airlines against crossing in Saudi's airspace, and they should take our warning seriously until the end of the blockade at the Sana'a International Airport. So definitely heating up there. Looks like they are going to become active as an Iranian proxy. And Saudi Arabia has actually avoided a lot of the Iranian war stuff. There's been no, direct strikes back and forth recently. And so this is a way to get Saudi involved and distracted away from focusing on Iran if they have to go focus on the Houthis on their southern border. Now let's head over to the Strait of Hormuz. And CENTCOM started a blockade after Trump ordered them to yesterday. But Trump also yesterday said he was going to do a 20% toll on all ships, making no sense because the whole argument for attacking Iran at that point was that they were restricting free trade and no one had the right in international waters to charge people. And then Trump comes out and says, but we will charge people. So just another example of the head of the US military having no strategic mindset or any discipline or consistency of thought. But it seems like he backed away on it because it made no sense. So he released this today. Oil is flowing like never before thanks to the awesome power of the United States military. A special salute to the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, and Commander of the United States Central Command, Admiral Brad Cooper. Because of them and all members of the most powerful military anywhere in the world by far, the Strait of Hormuz is open to all ship traffic except for Iran, and that is because of their lying, violent, malicious leadership, which is taking them down the path of total, all caps, destruction. We will therefore have a full blockade, but only on ships coming to and from Iranian ports or carrying anything that has to do with Iranian cargo. Based on highly productive conversations with Middle East leadership, aka your 20% makes no sense, it would actually have been cheaper than what Iran wanted to charge, I have decided to replace the 20% United States reimbursement fee, not a toll, not a tax, with trade and investment deals that the various Gulf states will be making into the U.S. So basically, the Gulf states called and said, hey, we will put billions of dollars in the U.S. so you do not do this. Those investments will be massive, but at the same time, extraordinarily good for them and their future. As everyone is aware, we have the largest dollar investment in the United States of any country in history. But these new investments will make that number even larger, and we will see factories, plants, and equipment pour into the United States at historic levels, which will create additional millions of high-paying American jobs. Blah, blah, blah. Americans winning. I'm the best. So he did back down from the 20% because it made no damn sense. So I'm glad that that's not a thing anymore. But that was a major factor and a major source of confusion going on in the Strait. And then he continues to say that the Strait is all good to pass, but we know that's not necessarily the case. Here we have the updates from UK MTO showing all the vessels that were struck on July 13th. There's 4 of them there. And then Iran continues to do so. So no matter how many times the president says the Strait is open, if it keeps getting hit with missiles, there's not going to be a ton of traffic going on. Ultimately, these are businesses and they can't afford to get their vessels blown up regardless of what the U.S. says. So the blockade would be down here. You can see all these ships have pulled up in Fujairah, which is UAE, and then also Oman normally has more stuff going on, but this was hit earlier in a strike. So this was a port for Oman. So a lot of the ships have been hanging out on this side, getting their stuff and then heading out. Of course, that doesn't allow them to get to Kuwait so they can sell their wares, or Iraq to sell their stuff. So even though it looks like there's a lot of ships in here, it's nowhere close to that target. And often you need to see them actually cross this strait and not just hover around here or stay trapped inside of here. So they want to go on the Iranian toll lane, which is up towards the top, and they were trying to force everyone to go that route. People kept trying to follow my cursor here. They kept trying to skirt right around Oman and avoid the Iranian area. And then that's where a bunch of them got hit repeatedly. This is that strike map of where people have been hit. So all of them in the lower area. So all Iran has to do, no matter what America says, is just find a way to get their cruise missiles off from anywhere on this coastline, hit a ship. And these are businesses. They're not going to risk lives, but most importantly to them, they are not going to risk that ship. That's a lot of money. So everyone's just going to kind of hang out here, and then we'll continue in this limbo of the strait is open. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. So it might be open literally by we have declared it, but functionally it is not open. Now to cover the strikes that have been going on back and forth for, day 4 or 5 at that point. And red would be strikes from the American side. Green would be strikes returned from Iran. So you can see Kuwait's been getting hit, Bahrain, Qatar, the bases, the US bases in there, and then also Jordan has been hit too. But let's focus on the American strikes. If you notice, they're all along the coast here. Why is that? Well, they want to hit all of the infrastructure here that allows Iran to attack ships or can stop America from taking their fleets up here and taking the actual control of the Persian Gulf. So the strategy is much more on the coastlines, all through here, attacking the Navy, the drone boats, the mini subs, any anti air systems, any stuff like that. But they're trying to knock all of this out on the coast, and that's where a majority of the attacks have since the wars fired back up on. So occasionally you'll see one up higher, but generally it's this. It's not them attacking the nuke sites that were up in this area, Isfahan, that kind of stuff, or targeting Tehran, which they were doing early on in the campaign to try to topple the government. So the strategy seems to be highly focused here on the strait. Usual suspects, Bandar Abbas, that's a really big one that you see repeatedly. Bushehr as well, you see repeatedly. So that's the strategy right here. Just knock out all of these little areas of control so we can get the ships in, all good. But what's unique is they targeted Quiche Island, and I don't like this one strategically. Now, there is IRGC here. You can see there's a big airport right here in the middle, and they have plenty of ports throughout this here island where they can launch attacks from. This is Coast Guard Center here. So they have a lot of infrastructure, but what's cool about this island is it's kind of their answer to like UAE. It's like a little mini Abu Dhabi, right? So it doesn't have the same cultural restrictions. It's much more free money, and there's a lot of cool stuff here. Like there's I don't know if I'll find it off the top of my head, but yeah, the Penguin Snow Park. This is not what you think of the stereotypes of Iran, where people are covered in black and super religious. That's kind of their answer to this. So this is the most kind of Western version of Iran. And I don't really want to attack it unless you have to, because this is kind of the model that the US and the Gulf countries would like Iran to be. Very forward, progressive thinking, not progressive in the American sense, but progressive in actual progress, economic progress. So the US did strike here, and they struck this water and power company, which provides power, of course, but water desalination. So that's a big factor. Hopefully it doesn't continue to a bunch, but it did knock on some power. I'm just kind of weary of attacking places that are basically the model of what we want in our image Iran to be. So, and of course, there's a lot of residential areas here, a lot of just normal people with their kids going to do fun stuff. This is not like some IRGC super stronghold, even though they do have facilities here. So, the attack on Kish is unique, and I hope it doesn't continue too much, or I hope you don't black out the power for the whole island. I know you need to destroy drones, boats, all of that kind of stuff, but you get into these questions of dual use infrastructure, right? Can you target it? And you can under Geneva, you can target it, but you still need to be smart politically here. You don't want to turn the lights off for everybody, and hopefully that's not the case. Most military bases in the US are on some type of private grid. So dual use is very common. Like there's going to be dual use for electricity, dual use for water. That's a duh. You do have to figure out, is the military using 10% or 90%? Or are they trying to hide amongst the civilians or blah, blah, blah? But I generally advise to avoid dual use infrastructure. I know that you need some economic warfare, but you don't want to turn this specific island that's pretty forward thinking and something you would like to see more of into a bunch of America haters. So that's just one factor for this specific strike. But you can see there's a lot going on elsewhere across the coast. That's been back and forth. Even as I'm recording this, they just hit Bahrain again, continue with Qatar. Kuwait is a big factor as well. And next, I want to zoom out and look at all the proxies and all the chess pieces on the board. So here are all the potential players, some of them states, some of them non-state actors here, but green aligned with Iran, red generally aligned with America, but once again, mostly these are states. So they have their own interests, but I think it's safe to kind of say this. So of course we have Iran over here represented by Iran. And then you jump over to this side, you have Turkey. I put them as USA aligned. They get along. The F-35 thing is funny, but they're NATO. Generally, they're not going to attack, right? I would really give them like a gray because they're a free agent. They kind of hang out with everybody, but they're not a threat, so they go in red. Then, of course, Syria right now, HTS, Al-Jilani took over the country. Now, this country's fractured, so there's plenty of people that would support Iran in it and support the American side, all of that. But the government in control is Al-Jilani, and he was backed by Turkey. So I put him as red, even though this country could produce all sorts of unique variations. Then, of course, we have Hezbollah. That's Iranian, Israel, American aligned. Hamas, weak as hell right now, but still there and aligned with Iran. Jordan is USA aligned. The Houthis down here, who we talked about earlier, is Iran aligned. The actual recognized government of Yemen, the PLC, they are backed by Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is USA aligned. Oman as well. And then, of course, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait here. So these are kind of the pieces on the board. Red, America, green, Iran. And most of what Iran is doing is non-state actors. These are proxies that don't have actual governmental control, even though they can take over swaths of land. And most of what America has is actual governments. Now, what's important here is what's going on in Kuwait. So Kuwait is getting smacked repeatedly because I think we're launching a lot of missiles from there. And so Iran's hitting them back, trying to take down those systems. There's a lot of tension in the south of Iraq. Right here goes Kuwait, and then Iraq for a little bit, and then Iran. So there's a narrow strip that's southern Iraq here. And Kuwait keeps killing their fishermen that come out in their waters. And so it's tense between Iraq and Kuwait, southern Iraq. Right now, the Iraqi FM, or actually prime minister, is in the US and he's talking with Trump. Trump saying, I love Iraq, all of that kind of stuff. So it seems like the government of Iraq is solid for the US, but they could get overthrown at any moment because there's a new group I talked about in yesterday's video that I was curious to see when they start talking. And it's the IRI, the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, and it's a loose confederation of like all of these groups here that are ever changing, just how the war on terror, how these groups pop up and disappear and reform and all of that. So this is a loose confederation, but what you need to know is that they're with the Shia sect of Islam, which is the same with Iran, and they put out a statement. And this is the translated version. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, gotta say that. So once we get done with the prayers here, among the implications of this noble verse that they just listed above, we point to the following. First, we commend the movement of our brothers in Yemen, and we declare our absolute support for their blessed steps in breaking the siege imposed by the treacherous Al-Assad, the remnant of the accursed tree, and the ending the influence of the Al-Zaid, which has increased the suffering of the oppressed Yemeni people. Either there is security for all or no security for anyone, either prosperity for all or everyone is deprived. The Yemenis possess the means to turn the tables. Second, the repression of the followers of Alu Bat, peace be upon them, and their followers in the Gulf monarchies at the hands of Al-Jilani's gangs will not go unpunished. The score will remain unsettled, and the perpetrators will undoubtedly pay the price. I always love how they phrase things. It's so intense. Third, this is really important. If war breaks out against the Islamic Republic, the participation of the resistance forces will be immediate and decisive. This decision is based on faith. It's non-negotiable. I actually like that, where they're just like, nope, this is what God told me. There's really nothing else you can say. So right here, if Kuwait were to start fighting Iran, they will attack Kuwait. Fourth, the recklessness of the ruling regime in Kuwait must be stopped, and the stoppage will be by the sword. Hell yeah, brother. Fifth, we support campaigns to pursue the corrupt, but these campaigns must not be a stage for settling scores or eliminating opponents. They should encompass all government institutions without exception. So they are willing to go to war with anyone that goes to war with Iran, and then most importantly, they're going to go to war with Kuwait. So here, let's go back to our board here, what this means. So if it was literal chess here, and I was Iran, I would push my piece in the Houthis up to Saudi Arabia and make Saudi Arabia have to focus on that so they can't help America. Of course, America is going to fight Iran, and Iran knows that. So if Iran can then take the piece from the Houthis to Saudi Arabia, then we take the IRI group, and then we attack Kuwait. That way, Kuwait can't put all of its focus on Iran. So now we can handle Kuwait better. Then we take Hamas, whatever's left of them, and then Hezbollah, and then we attack Israel. Or we do Hezbollah, something with Syria. Jilani's playing this kind of neutral game, but America does want Jelani to go attack Hezbollah. So they could go move on Syria or they could move on Israel, which is important. And then we have all of these guys fighting different proxies. And that way you don't get all of the red focused purely on Iran. That's the game that's going on. And you're seeing one by one the proxies in the Houthis, IRI pop up. And of course, Hezbollah's been getting after it up there. So you're seeing the wider regional war that has really been set up for years now getting clicked into place. This is not as simple as the Strait of Hormuz or toppling Iran. This will likely spread all over the region and get really, really nasty.